Hi guys, Jonathan Fields, and my guest today is Scott Belsky. Scott's had a pretty incredible journey from management consultant to the founder of his own organization that's really built to help the creative world. So we're going to dive into this journey and really explore what he's building. Welcome, Scott. It's great to be hanging out.
Thanks, Jonathan. Good to be here.
So I want to take a step back with you. Right now, you're at the helm of a really fascinating company called Behance, which is doing some neat things that we'll dive into. But this has not been what you've been doing for your entire professional career. Take me back a couple of years before this was really even part of what you were about.
Yeah, well, as an undergrad in school, I was always fascinated with the idea of redesigning the resume for creativity or creative professionals. All these companies would say, hey, we hire for creativity, yet we all send around these black and white one-page Microsoft Word documents.
That look like everything else.
Exactly, and certainly do not suggest any creative potential at all. And so there was this thesis of redesigning that for the creative. And then I kind of lost my way, went to a big corporation, was doing sort of internal management consulting type stuff. But all the while, as we were leveraging all these tools and experts to help the company and clients kind of fix problems and get more organized, I was thinking, gosh, if we could just leverage these sorts of resources for the creative community, probably the most disorganized community on the planet, but also the community that makes our lives meaningful and interesting. And so that was sort of the culmination of the idea of Behance, which was, what if there was a company that would help organize and empower creative people?
Right.
And so I started tinkering with this idea while at that old job, and then officially left for business school, which I think was sort of my hedge, and but was really leaving just to kind of germinate with this a little bit and play with the idea. And started business school while starting Behance, and then throughout business school probably dropped out almost 5 or 6 times. And in retrospect, it may have been a cooler story to say I dropped out and pursued Behance.
Well, it's kind of like the classic tech founder story these days.
Right, exactly. And an MBA is like a dime a dozen, but those who leave an MBA program to continue to work in their business, now that's something special.
Right.
But I did, squeak by and finish the graduate degree while getting Behance off the ground. But really for the past 5 years, I've been solely focused on this the company and building the team.
Right. So, and I want to go into what the team is and what the company is about and sort of like how you're building it also. But you mentioned something. You said, the creative world is like the world that, to a certain extent makes life worth living, but at the same time, potentially one of the most disorganized or like cultures on the planet. What's that about?
Well, I think that the essence of the idea generator is people who are extremely passionate about what they do. You could be working in the nonprofit world or the creative industry or really anything that drives you and you're truly, truly passionate about. The result of that passion is you find problems that need solving and you actually take the initiative to solve them. And the problem with that is you create too many new ideas, and oftentimes no one idea sees the light of day as a result of so many other ideas that you have.
I'm raising my hand over.
Right, me too. So I think it's sort of the consequence of passion is the disorganization and the distraction that comes along with it.
Yeah, so it's almost like the clutter starts inside your head because it's just a massive idea, essentially.
Yeah, and I think like the obstacles that we face as creative people trying to make our ideas happen are both within us, as you said, like those, the obstacles we face create for ourselves, the demons, the things that may cause our creativity, but also we've never fully resolved. And then the external obstacles. There are all sorts of, society in itself is hypocritical. Society shuns what we end up celebrating. You drop out of college, you do something different, you start something new, people think you're crazy, and then you change the world and everyone celebrates you. So there are obstacles both internally and externally that get in the way of helping creative people realize their potential.
Yeah, and it is amazing. I think our generation, it would have been really unusual that you go to college, you can go to grad school, a lot of people that I know, and then you do your job and that point, and then the generation is sort of like it's coming up a little bit behind us. At least I'm a little bit older than you, I think. It's much more wed to that sort of like very traditional path. It's much more, I think largely because there's so much news over the last couple of years of people who have, dropped out and they've created stuff. But there's no doubt that you're known as, you're kind of a pariah or a maverick until that thing that you dropped out of the mainstream path to do catches fire, and then you're a genius.
Right, and I think part of the reason why we sort of don't condone that entrepreneurial spirit in general is, part of it's the education system, right? And that could be a whole other sit down with us. But I think that I slowly but surely, I feel like this next generation of entrepreneurial spirits are starting to feel like they have certain expectations of the work that they do. They want to be fully utilized. Even if they work within a large company or they want to work on their own, they want to feel like their skills are fully utilized. They want to feel like there's less friction getting in the way of them doing what they actually want to do. I call these people free radicals. People that just have these expectations for the work that they do, and they either end up being freelancers or independent professionals, or they work in companies that allow them to do their greatest work and sort of use the company ethos as the wind at their back rather than impeding progress.
Right.
But hopefully more companies will realize this and sort of have this free radical notion. Like, we let people kind of run with things that overlap with their genuine interests and their skill set, and rather than constantly create friction that gets in the way.
Yeah, and it is amazing. It does seem like there's a corporate culture that's been grown around. I mean, I love the way you describe it as friction.
Yeah.
It's sort of like the process is there almost because it serves the process.
Right.
But it doesn't necessarily serve the greater good or the output or
Yeah.
the ability for people to come alive within the context of their work.
Well, think about it. I mean, even a few years ago, if you wanted to do anything in technology, you need to go to a company that has server farms at their disposal. You need to go to a company that has billing tools and all this other stuff that now is available online at a monthly subscription rate of like
Right.
$10 a month, you know? So you really have at your disposal cloud storage and, I mean, everything else that you would ever need now to, and again, what's that doing? To your point, it's just removing friction. And I think that's a real exciting trend that hopefully will empower more creative people to do things.
Yeah, no, I think also that's one of the things that's driving a lot of a big shift to entrepreneurship and a big shift for people, like you and a lot of other people who have this crazy idea in their head to try it, because the cost of entry and is a fraction of what it was even 5 years ago, and the friction, like once you've entered, is it's nominal compared to, and the risk of loss is okay. So it's time and reputation, but it's generally not a whole lot of money these days.
That's another good point. And then again, and this is one of those things I think is more distinct to the U.S. than to other countries. But there's also this culture of failure is okay. I mean, I know still in Europe, a lot of people feel like if they have one failure, they're blacklisted from any opportunity. Whereas in the U.S. and Silicon Valley, I mean, I was part of this startup that didn't work, and then this startup, and now it's like, oh, badges of honor.
It's almost like you're untouchable if you haven't been through like one big public flame out. I know.
Right.
So let's kind of bring this forward a little bit. So from this seed of wanting to serve the creative community, you didn't just say, okay, I want to help the creative community. You said to yourself, there's a very specific need that I want to. So take me a little bit deeper into like what that need is and how you figured out, how you decided you want to at least start to try and serve it.
Yeah, I think that in the beginning there was this idea that creatives have enough creativity. They need more organization, and they need to be empowered to execute and manage their careers more efficiently and productively. And so when we started, we said, okay, let's have this mission to organize and empower creative people. Let's make it mission-centric and medium agnostic. And what I mean by that is, let's not be confined to technology or a paper product or a consulting business or maybe a book. Let's just say, let's just focus on mission. And we started by doing a blog, and generating content, interviewing especially productive, creative people and teams.
Right.
And by doing that, that was sort of like our market research. And we realized that there was a need for a professional platform that wasn't about inspiration or friends, but was about like truly broadcasting your work efficiently and getting opportunity and attribution for the work that you do. And that was the seed for the Behance network, which fast forward today, we're fast approaching 1 million members showcasing their work, across all industries.
So what exactly is the Behance network for those that haven't experienced?
So the Behance network is a place for any creative person or team to showcase and discover creative work. And so when you put up your work, whether it's furniture design or interactive design or sound production or whatever it is, and you put it up, people start to follow you, people start to appreciate the work that you do. And as that work circulates in the system, and you can also sync with LinkedIn and sync with your own personal website and any other, RISD or School of Visual Arts or other places like that, the more exposure your work gets, the more people can help sort of curate it and decide what's good and not good. And then as companies and others who look for creative talent come into the network to search, your presence is elevated based on the quality of your work.
Right. No, I love that.
And so that's it's just this platform for mass exposure. And people's websites only get traffic from people who already know them. We're about the discovery of creative work you didn't know about already.
So you create a platform which is largely about discovery, which is like you said, it's fascinating because so many people develop their own sort of like little private followings and they can direct them around. But this is all about making your work available to people who have no idea you exist.
Right.
And that's grown to how many members now?
Yeah, so we're approaching 1 million creatives, and we have, I think, around 10 to 12 million visitors in the last 30 days.
Wow.
Of people who are discovering the work. And so that's really, I mean, what people don't realize sometimes is that if you take all the other kind of portfolio sites for design, photographers, whatever, put them all together, we basically have 15 times the traffic of that aggregate. It's so from a discovery standpoint, this is how you get found, right? And more importantly these days, it's about getting attribution for the work that you do. You do this great campaign for this brand or for them or for that, but how do people know who's really behind what? I mean, in essence, every portfolio is kind of a lie, right? Because you're saying, this is what I did.
Like a resume.
Yeah, this is what I did. Well, no, I mean, there was a photo retoucher and there was a hairstylist and there was a graphic designer. So by having a network that also crosses the intersection of all, is the intersection of all creative fields, you can actually start to have shared projects in multiple people's portfolio and get real visibility about who really did what. And that's great for a career opportunity because ultimately you hire someone based on their past work.
Yeah, and so the way that you actually rise up within that community is that other people who participate in the community, but they comment, they vote for you,
Yeah, so people are commenting on projects, they're appreciating work, and but the other thing that we're actually focused on these days is the difference between what we call the critical mass and the credible mass. So the critical mass is how many people like something,
right,
and that's kind of Web 1.0.
Right.
And what we're interested in on these days is the credible mass, which is really how many people who have great credibility in that specific creative field appreciate your work.
Right.
With this hope that someday some incredible student in architecture school or some great illustrator in Romania or Poland or wherever they may be in the world publishes something, and then someone else who's really credible as either a curator or a professional in that field appreciates it, and unbeknownst to them, they gave it more weight, and they now make it more visible in the system.
Right. And everybody who's following that one person who's highly credible, or probably a lot of other credible people.
Yeah, end up seeing it, and that's sort of the system with this really robust activity feed where you see not only everything by people that you follow, but also everything that's appreciated by people that you follow. And so there's this new kind of level of efficient discovery of creative production.
And it makes so much sense too, because one of the things that you kind of learn pretty quickly in the online world where there's voting involved in anything, or rating involved in anything, is that it's not that hard to game.
Right.
And so like if you all of a sudden you want to rise to the top of the community, like, you can literally go out and buy votes.
Right.
You can go to all these different places and pay 5 cents a vote and boom, 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 boom. So I always wondered in certain systems like that, how do you handle that? And this is an interesting way. How do you actually assess who's credible and who's not?
Well, to gain credibility in a field, I mean, you really have to have a full portfolio of work within that field that's been appreciated by other people within that field. And so to game that is really difficult, right. But we have a whole team that's always focused on the data integrity and the anti-gaming measures.
Yeah, it seems like you would have to be. So from there, you've got close to 1 million people on that place, 10 to 12 million people actually coming to this community. You also mentioned that, and that is an unbelievable resource for, especially, I love the idea of somebody who's, just comes out of the blue and has been secretly working on their craft and has some gift added to it, and they just show up and, boom, it's like you can just kind of explode out of the blue. To me, that's it's like serendipity meets technology and just meets,
I mean, we call it, sometimes on the network side, when people say, well, what are you trying to do for this industry? What are you trying to do for people's careers? In 2 words, creative meritocracy. Somehow, some way matching the best talent with the best opportunity.
Right.
And I think it requires us to have great tools to efficiently showcase work and push it everywhere it needs to be and measure the quality based on, real metrics.
Yeah.
So it's exciting. It's also just inspiring. Every morning coming in and going to my activity feed and just being seeing all the work produced by people that I really respect and admire for their creative skills that I just, am humbled by. Just seeing this stream is powerful in itself.
Which I love. Because just sitting and talking to you, you're up, you're leaning, and the energy in your voice, it's like, this is somebody who shows up at work every morning, and you've got a company to run. There are going to be good days and bad days, but clearly, this lights you up.
Yeah.
So, what is? I want to talk more about the other things that you're building. So you got some really interesting things going on, but what is it about this? About you and the connection to this that just lights you up?
I think I just really, I admire the I admire creative work that gets to see the light of day, and I also empathize with the struggle that anyone who is creative goes through. Over the course of writing my book, it was all about creatives that actually execute. Yet all of those people also struggled throughout their career, and if those people struggle, then we all struggle, certainly. So I think it's a combination of really knowing, why I do what I do, and I love the people that I work with. I learn from them every day, and I also love building the capacity of the people that I work with. And I think maybe that means I just love management, but I like the idea of we all have things we want to become better at or learn more about, and the opportunity in helping other people with their careers to become great at that is part of like my day that I love. And some people don't like that. I know other people who say, oh yes, as I rise the ranks of a business, I don't want to be in the position where I have to manage people. But to me, it's like building the capacity of people is management. And that's an exciting endeavor.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I feel similarly. One of the most enjoyable things that I've done in various ventures has been the opportunity. And people have always asked me, like, what's the best thing about being an entrepreneur? Like, is it the freedom? I'm like, no, that's a lot of mythology wrapped around that. Like, is it the money? It's like, when you succeed, the money's nice, but it takes
usually you don't. And
right,
it's hard.
really hard work, and you're probably going to fail. And it's always when I really have thought about it. It's a really similar answer. It's about the ability to craft my own culture, and then mentor people. There's something about it that I think is largely lost very often, especially as organizations tend to grow. I think a lot of that it's really hard to hold on to. But it fills me up, and it clearly, is something that really drives you.
It does, and it's also a personal challenge, because I think that when you start something, it goes through many iterations that require many transformations as a person. When you start up and you have two people in a room, it's just like you have nothing going for you. No one knows or cares about anything that you're doing, and you're completely insignificant. And there's a certain set of skills to endure and succeed in that environment. And then you start hiring people and growing and managing, and then you start presenting publicly, and then you start making relationships with large companies, and then you are a large company. And each one of these stages requires a personal transformation in what you do every day and how you operate and how you take feedback. And so I think that's one of the reasons why so many startups have very different teams from the beginning and then at the end. But as a team, we've actually loved the idea of transforming ourselves, and we talk about it in that language too. And so that's kind of our effort to, I think, stick together over the long haul.
Yeah, which is an amazing thing, because like you said, there are a lot of teams where you've got the founding group, and they have no interest in transforming to become the operating group and the growth group. All they want to do is found, and they're happy handing it off and moving, or they're not happy, but they have no interest in developing the skill set and transformation needed, so they get replaced because it's in the best interest of the company.
And maybe that's a difference between you have serial entrepreneurs and mission-driven entrepreneurs. Serial entrepreneurs just love starting something up, and as soon as it's running, they want to go do something new. Mission-driven entrepreneurs, in my eyes at least, are just like trying to solve a problem relentlessly and will just keep wanting to do it, and that's what drives them. And to me, the notion of serial entrepreneurship is masochistic. The idea of having to go through all of that again and then again and then again like makes my stomach churn. So I think part of it's been like finding out that element of me. But I absolutely love, yes, the team and the people that we serve, the members. These are some of the most creative and interesting people in the world. And if we can help them get a little bit more organized, it must be making a great impact in ways we can measure and ways we can only fathom.
Right. So let's circle back also. You mentioned a book. You wrote a book. I've read the book. It's fantastic. It's helped me. Tell me what that was and how it came about.
Well, the book came as a result of the early blogging we were doing in starting Behance and going to some very productive, creative people and teams and asking them, what is it that you do that others don't? Mm-hmm. Why is it that you have a history of making ideas happen? Whether they're good or not is beside the point, but you just continually push them out the door. Right. And what we found was that there's no such thing as idea meritocracy, where the best idea has the best chance of happening, because there are other forces at play, like how organized you are, and how you leverage your community to gain traction on ideas, and also how you lead a creative team, keep them together over time. Right. And so it was sort of the discovery of many of these counterintuitive aspects of those forces that caused me to say, well, why don't we try to package this? And so that was what became the 99%, which is our think tank on the execution of ideas. Mm-hmm. And then a lot of my own personal interviews and thoughts on this became this book.
Very cool. So the 99%, the website, the blog exists. Was that the original blog? There was the original blog.
Original blog was just actually Behance.
That was just Behance.
Yeah, it was just like Behance.com was a blog, actually, before there was even a network.
Because I remember when I discovered 99% blog, I was like, this is fantastic.
Yeah.
But so that existed. That was a later iteration.
That was late. That was sort of, the original content was then morphed into that.
Right.
So it definitely existed before the 99% existed. But the 99% was our realization that Behance was going to be the platform. Mm-hmm. And so we wanted to have its own a brand and platform for the content as well. And so we were inspired by that famous Edison quote, genius is 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration. And we said, let's focus on the 99. Let's focus on execution, perspiration, and everything else but the idea itself.
Right.
And so the moniker for the 99% website is, it's not about ideas, it's about making ideas happen. And it's just full of content. And then the book is, part of that side of our business.
So writing the book for you, that's a whole, you've done management consulting. You've started this really interesting, complex business that's serving a huge community. But then it comes time for you to actually sit down and write a full-length book. What's that process for you on an individual level like?
It was painful. It was painful. It was very meta as well, because I was writing a book about making ideas happen.
Yeah.
And an idea that I always wanted to make happen was writing a book about making ideas happen. It was really... interesting. I sort of equate, and I know this only partially now because my wife is pregnant, but I equate it sort of like to a pregnancy, where you have this initial act of conception, which is really easy and quite enjoyable, and then and then you have this idea for a book, and then you're like, okay, and you start writing,
right,
and then it gets tiresome and somewhat painful and very uncomfortable. Your sleep patterns change. Right. You're worried about what the editor is going to think. You're worried about what other people are going to say. You're worried that you're doing it wrong, and then as it approaches the due date, the editor starts putting pressure on you, and you're like, your whole life changes in so many ways, and you're also scared about handing this thing in. Yeah. And then you hand it in, and eventually they hand you your first copy. And it's like, oh my goodness, I made this, out of nothing.
I'm back in there right now.
and then other people hold it, and they're like, oh wow, this is great. And then you're saying to yourself, maybe it wasn't so bad after all. Maybe I would want another. Right. But that's sort of in a nutshell.
It's that convenient memory. It's then you only remember the highs.
Right. Yeah.
I trust me. I've been there a couple of times now. But it's always it must have been so kind of surreal at certain points when you're realizing that you're writing a book about making ideas happen, and the whole meta sort of thing that was going on.
Sure.
In that also to a certain extent, it's your ability to do this in the way that you want to do it is proof of concept that all these things that you write about work.
And that's, one of the things I do like about our business is we try to practice what we preach.
Right.
We are a company trying to help organize and empower the creative world, and we are also a very creative team with tons of ideas, and we try to follow our own rules, and it's hard. It's sort of easier to be coach than player sometimes. But it's great, and we also beta test a lot of these ideas that we write about before we write in the office, and so it's fun.
No, that's great. So from the book, what was your hope for the book?
My hope for the book is that at the end of the day, more creative people, especially those that were in our network, would use it as a complement to their kind of creative juice. And this would become a bit of a Bible for those who really want to execute ideas, and that there would be a few best practices that everyone would take away from reading it.
Right.
And I, as a company, I hoped that it would open the door to what our mission is about, and make sure that people see Behance as a company that's trying to do this rather than a technology company, or something else. So it's just part of our DNA, that we are about something. And the book was really meant to emphasize that. And one choice I had was, do I own the book, or does the company own the book?
Right.
And I chose for the business, the team, to own the book, because I felt like it was so centrally a part of what we do that it just made sense from the DNA standpoint.
Yeah, and from that book, and well, actually, I guess not from it, but existing before it, you had already, so you've got a book, it's out in the world, it does a much sort of like more robust job of describing who you are, what you're about, what your beliefs are, and what you're trying to do in the world, and that supports the Behance network, it supports the 99% blog, and which are serving on a whole bunch of different levels, but circling back to like what you first said when we started talking, which is that you decided from the very beginning that this is not a company, which is about a product.
Right.
So what was the exact language you used again?
The notion of it being medium agnostic.
Right. So that, I mean, to me, when I hear that, it means, okay, we're about a community and serving them the best way we can figure out at any given moment in time.
And that was really one of our core tenets from the very beginning, is that we believe that if we became an epicenter for the creative community, that we would have to use that position as not only a way to further our business, but also even when it's not for profit, make sure that we're leveraging that position to expose people to each other's ideas and to really have this sort of level of attribution transparency across. So all throughout our product and services that we've developed, we've had options like with the action pads. Do we allow people to download the PDF online for free, or do we only sell the product? Let's allow it for free as well. We want to help serve people. Or with the network, do we want to make people pay to contact somebody? Do we want to hide information and become this wall? Or do we want to make sure that at the end of the day, anyone can contact anyone for free? And that was an ethos question. It was like, we're here to empower creative careers. We can't get in the way. So that's sort of so far been a very great compass for us in developing product and service that I think a lot of companies forget, and along the way. And so that's,
Well, I think we get so wed to a particular, and I think a lot of companies start because they have an idea for a product or a solution, rather than because they feel a connection with a particular community, and they just want to serve that community and help make what they do better, easier. And I think that's the huge difference here. And it's been my experience that when you start based on you just want to take one solution and see if you can, move it to, as big and as bad as you can possibly do it.
Sure.
It may work, but the likelihood of it working, I think, is substantially less than when your bigger goal is just to, we want to serve a particular community in the way that makes the most sense for them, and that's going to change and evolve. So that, built into that mission, you have to be constantly open to adaptation.
And that's one of those great, unique challenges / opportunities we face now. We're we're a team that's been together for 5 years, and we're seeing all sorts of new technology change and evolve, and the needs of the creative community are changing. I mean, we actually feel like we're now on the verge of this model of distributed creative production, where people don't necessarily even work in companies anymore as creatives. They work on their own terms, and they have to be found and then even managed through a system or through some simple way. And so, and also the technology of content management and display is changing. It's becoming simpler. And so we're trying to always rethink our product. And I think people will be surprised actually by some of the things we're going to be doing in Behance over the next couple of years, because they're not just iterations on our product. There's some pretty bold things that we want to do still as a company. And as long as we still feel like we're doing crazy things, then I think we're still in a good place.
And it's like the smile on your face when you talk about that, clearly, like, there's a lot of fun ahead for you.
Yeah.
I mean, so developing new stuff has got to be like a big thing for you.
Never a dull moment. I love those moments where it's like, let's just remove this feature. How does everyone feel about that? And everyone's like, and sometimes I'm the one who's like, what? No. And then, you get drawn into it. And then 3 days later, you're like, wow, I'm still developing in my career. Like, we just made a big decision and it was the right one. So it's a lot of fun to keep changing. And one thing this team does not do is live on its laurels. We almost have this, again, cultural element of when there's a big success come in the next day. It's like, all right, so let's get to work.
Right. There's a classic Buddhist parable, which it's not a parable, it's just like a short phrase, which is before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water.
Right.
It's kind of like the same ethic, built into the business.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's just rolling up your sleeves and pursuing a problem that you want to solve.
And I think that's what a lot of people miss out on also, is the joy of being able to do that. I mean, I know you're very familiar with Teresa Modelay's work, and her last book about how, the big thing that motivates so many people that everybody misses, they just want to see regular progress. They want to keep growing, in little bits and pieces every day.
Yeah, I think that we when you're pursuing a very big, bold, creative project, the traditional short-term rewards that we are relying on, like, in grade school, getting the check on a test, or the A plus, or the grade at the end of the year, or the bonus when you get a job. It's like the bonus at the end of the year and a paycheck every 2 weeks, and that's what keeps us going and going and going.
Yeah.
And in a big, bold, creative project, those short-term rewards are stripped away from us, and we're working, only towards a potential long-term reward. And I just don't think that's enough for human beings. I think we're trained and we're hardwired for short-term rewards. And so what you have to do to supplant the missing short-term rewards in a bold creative project is use other triggers, other almost synthetic short-term rewards to keep you going. I think one of those is the progress you're making, sort of rewarding yourself with the progress you made yesterday as like an idea of the fact that I am actually incrementally moving the ball forward.
Right.
Statistics, other 3 people visited your blog yesterday versus 7 today versus 12 tomorrow. I mean,
easily
it's
trackable metrics.
It's easy, and so I think that we have to hardwire ourselves in some ways to be able to get around that and keep trucking.
Yeah, and it's an interesting process because you've got to just sort of like keep digging in and figure out how do I keep growing, because it is very easy, I think, to have some really big success, and I've seen this and I've experienced it myself, is that in the very beginning of starting anything, you kind of don't have a whole lot to lose. Mm-hmm. So you'll just try and you'll take risks, you'll experiment, you'll completely mess with everything. And then you get to a certain point where you've actually attained a certain amount of success, you have a track record, you've built up brand equity, money in the bank. And what I see happening, and again, I've experienced this myself and really battled with it, is what I call the entrepreneurs or the creators recoil, which is now you actually have something to lose. And so now when you're in that position, but you're challenged with, okay, I need to keep creating and pushing and innovating, I could, like, if I fall from here, it's going to hurt a lot more.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I think it's one of those little pep talks you have to give yourself, which is, why do I do this? Am I doing this to sustain the success that I've had so far? Am I doing this to play it safe? Or am I doing this because I still want to solve a problem in the best way possible? And that might be the 180 of what I'm doing now.
Right.
I hope we never stop asking ourselves that question, because the day we do, we become obsolete.
Yeah. At this point, you've built a substantial business which is serving a very, very substantial community in a way where there was a big hole, there was a big gap in the market. One of the things we haven't talked about is, even though you're sort of product agnostic, you do create product. It's just not, this is the only thing that we do. And you brought up the action method. Tell me what that is, how it came to life.
Yeah, for us, the action method was our own way of managing tasks and staying action-oriented in the work that we were doing. We realized that if we had a really great, simple design for how to track what's actionable, both during a project, online, as well as sort of on paper during meetings, that we'd be more likely to actually do stuff. And so we created the system for ourselves, first on paper, and it was actually our bootstrapping story. We actually bootstrapped early days in the business by selling these action pads to people. And then friends were like, oh, can I get them? People wanted them more and more, and it spread, and it became this little business on the side. But we also created this online version that now syncs with the iPhone and the iPad, and it's just a very simple side business to help us stay action-oriented, and then we share it with others. Yeah. So it's not our core business, but it's something that we use religiously and share with others.
And I think it's a great example also of you like walking the walk and talking the talk. Mm-hmm. It's like you create things because you're creating something, and right. You need to organize your own creative process. So it's like solve the problem for us.
Yeah.
And guaranteed other people are going to have similar problems. So let's share what we've done and generate some revenue from it at the same time.
That's the idea.
Very cool. So you've kind of hinted that there's some really big things coming. You don't have to reveal those because obviously But in your mind, you brought how long? So Behance is in existence now for
almost 5.5 years.
Okay, so 5.5 years. In your mind, what are the next couple of years? What are the big things that that are important to you about building Behance?
I think it's very important to the whole team that we simplify the service. I think that we kind of took the approach of let's just try to solve all of the problems in this area, and then we're seeing usage patterns. Certain things are extremely well used and certain things are not as used often, in the network. And so we're going to be simplifying and strengthening and speeding up the product, which involves hiring more great engineers and people who can help us think through the technology as well as the data. I mean, we know for hundreds and hundreds of thousands, literally millions of projects, who it was done for, what brand, what agency, what client, what tools were used, all that data that we can leverage to help connect creatives with each other and to help measure the quality of work too. So we're going to be doing a lot of work in mining and managing all of that better, which is going to be a big focus. And then I think from a company-wide standpoint, making sure that we can bring content like the 99% stuff that we do to more people, and we think more about the future of creative careers. We have this thesis that people will more and more be working on their own terms. They will be making great salaries, working directly with great brands and clients, and not always through middlemen. And we need to help build this system to facilitate that, both like discovering who you want to hire or work with, as well as managing work with them over time. So we're going to be thinking a lot about that over the coming years.
Yeah, love it. And one thing we actually didn't bring up was the 99% also has a whole nother, I don't know what you call it, brand extension experience. It's become this incredible conference in New York. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, the 99% conference was all about the execution of ideas. It started 4 years ago as a way to bring people together every year to talk about everything that happens after the idea. And so the one thing that's really special about this conference is we don't allow speakers to talk about what they've created. It's exclusively the execution, the management of the team, the pushing out and that stuff. So we really hit a chord on this one because the conference just has been selling out now every year, and there's a big demand for this type of content. So one of the questions is, should we bring this to more people? And Jocelyn now leads that part of our business and is thinking about that. But it's exciting. I mean, it's also a physical manifestation of Behance, and it's really interesting that we have our entire team attend this conference. Everyone sort of lives and feels it for 2 days, and so it's almost like the ultimate team development activity because we get to pick all these world-renowned people around, speakers and stuff, bring them all in, and it's like our own private little conference.
I think I need to try that.
Yeah, with like 300 friends.
Right.
But it's definitely it's part of our culture.
That's great. Well, I mean, you built something extraordinary. Your personal story, I think, is really fascinating too. It's sort of the evolution from management consultant to idea to growing and adding and morphing, and I love the connection to just being attached to the mission and the openness to adaptation and growth, both in terms of how you serve a community and within the company, and just the commitment to transformation is the word you use.
And and the last piece I would just say on that is it's also about this partnership. I started with a co-founder, who's my friend Matthias, who's our chief of design still to this day, and just the partnership that we have, and the partnership I have now with the leaders on the technology team I've been working with for years. At the end of the day, right, how we spend our time it's interpreted in a very human way, regardless of what we may be doing as a product or a company or a service or whatever. It's like, these are the people I work with every day. I come in, we roll up our sleeves together, and I would say that's like the greatest joy. And we've gone through times where we were not sure we were going to make it. We had times years ago where it was like, are we going to be able to make payroll in 3 months?
Yeah.
It was just really, really tough times early on. And to go through the trenches with these people and now be able to kind of see this grow and work is super, super cool.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, I congratulate you on everything you've accomplished.
Thank you.
I can't wait to see, whatever you've hinted at, I can't wait to sort of see what evolves over
Me
the next
either.
few years. And then a long future congratulations on on becoming a dad in
Thank you.
the not too distant future. It's an amazing, amazing experience. So, Scott, thank you so much for everything. Talk to you soon.